Welcome to the debate. I want you to just imagine this scenario for a second.
Okay, I'm listening.
So you have spent, I don't know, 2 agonizing years preparing for an international adoption.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a huge process.
Right, it's mountains of paperwork, you've passed every interview, you've paid thousands of dollars in fees, and you're driving to your final background check appointment. Like this is the last hurdle before you can fly out and bring your child home.
Talk about high stakes.
Exactly. So you're nervous, and right before you walk into the building, you squirt a heavy dollop of hand sanitizer on your hands.
Oh, no.
Right? It seems completely harmless, but that single mundane action temporarily dehydrates your skin. It flattens the microscopic ridges on your fingertips, just enough that the scanner rejects your prints.
Wow.
Yeah, your background check fails, your application is stalled for weeks, and you miss your travel window, all because of a drop of alcohol.
That is, well, it's a terrifying scenario. And honestly, it happens far more often than people realize. I mean, we tend to think of proving our identity as this very clean binary transaction, you know?
Yeah, like handing over an ID.
Exactly. You hand over a driver's license, someone looks at your face, and you move on. But when you step into the high-stakes world of biometrics, it's anything but simple.
Exactly. And today we're dissecting the modern biometrics and fingerprinting ecosystem. We're specifically focusing on the immense challenges applicants face right here in the Metro Boston, Massachusetts area.
Right.
And the central question we are grappling with is this: is the primary hurdle of obtaining a background check overcoming a complex, fragmented bureaucracy? Or is it fundamentally a physical execution challenge, like the biological reality of capturing pristine data from human skin?
It's a great question.
I'll be taking the position that the biometrics landscape is an inherently convoluted maze of overlapping institutional tracks, and one that absolutely requires a procedural expert to navigate.
And I will be arguing that the systemic rules are actually, well, they're strictly categorical and quite elegant. The true hurdle, the thing that actually derails people's careers and lives, is the biological challenge of capturing physical ridge detail flawlessly and, avoiding that dreaded multi-week rejection cycle.
Okay, well, let's dive into the bureaucracy first, because the very word biometrics is honestly a trap for the average person.
How so?
Well, it's this clinical, intimidating umbrella term, right? But it conflates 4 entirely distinct institutional tracks. Like, if you are in Boston and you need fingerprints, you're looking at USCIS.
Which is federal immigration.
Right, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. But then you also have the FBI for federal criminal history records.
Yep.
Then there are state-level agencies. So in Massachusetts, that's SAFEST, the statewide applicant fingerprint identification services. They handle things like public school teachers and childcare workers. And finally, you have this massive web of private employment and out-of-state requirements.
Right, so it is a broad spectrum of authorities.
It's a spectrum that completely overwhelms the applicant. An individual who needs, say, an FBI identity history summary for a foreign work visa could easily lose weeks waiting in the wrong queue because the terminology is just so opaque.
Because they think a fingerprint is a fingerprint.
Exactly. They assume it's all the same. But if you walk into a state office center looking for a federal apostille, you're entirely in the wrong place. And this is exactly why navigating the Boston landscape demands a procedural Sherpa. You need an entity like fingerprintboston.com.
Right.
Not just to put ink on paper, but to act as a navigational expert that provides precise FBI channeling that facilitates those highly complex apostille packages and deciphering agency request letters that might as well be written in a foreign language.
Look, I understand why you see it as a bureaucratic nightmare. I really do. But let me offer a different angle here.
Okay.
The system is heavily siloed, yes. But that siloing actually makes it elegantly simple if you know how to look at it. The perceived complexity is mostly just applicant panic.
Panic?
Yeah. In reality, you can decode this entire system by answering 2 incredibly basic questions. Who sent you, and where do the results go? That solves the navigational puzzle almost instantly.
Wait, how does that solve the puzzle when the applicant doesn't even know what an apostille is?
Because the instructions dictate the path. The real challenge isn't reading the map, it's the physical reality of the human body.
I mean,
No? Think about it. Criminal history background checks, rely on microscopic ridge detail on your fingertips. That topography, the grades due to simple aging, it wears down from manual labor, masonry, or gardening.
Right.
It gets damaged by chemotherapy or even certain daily medications that affect skin elasticity. The reason you need a rapid, correct expert in places like Tewksbury or Cambridge or Lowell isn't to decipher an acronym for you.
Well,
It's to physically execute a perfect capture in 15 minutes, overcoming your specific biological limitations so you don't get hit with an unclassifiable stamp by the federal government.
okay, I hear that, but you say the system is heavily siloed as if that automatically protects the user. I'd argue that the fragmentation is the complexity. Let's look back at that international adoption scenario I mentioned earlier.
Sure.
If a family in, let's say, Newton is adopting internationally, they are frequently trapped by overlapping tracks. They often need both a USCIS appointment via a Form I-797C,
Right, for the U.S. immigration side.
yes, for bringing the child in, but then they also need a completely separate FBI personal record check with an apostille for the foreign government letting the child go.
Exactly. 2 different sovereign requirements, so 2 different tracks.
Yes, but the average person assumes one biometrics appointment covers everything. It's a completely rational yet dangerous myth.
I suppose.
They think, well, I gave the government my fingerprints on Tuesday, therefore the government knows who I am for my appointment on Wednesday. And that assumption is how people miss critical, life-altering deadlines. They don't realize that USCIS and the FBI do not share that captured data with each other for these specific civil applications.
No, they definitely don't.
Right. So a premier service like Fingerprint Boston can look at a client's paperwork and settle in 30 seconds what the client couldn't figure out in a 10-minute phone call to a government helpline. That proves the architecture is user-hostile.
I have to push back on the idea that the architecture allows people to get dangerously lost, though. The rules are rigid, but they are explicit. Take USCIS.
Okay.
They require applicants to use their specific application support centers. Private providers simply cannot substitute for that appointment. It's physically impossible to accidentally fulfill a USCIS requirement at a private facility.
But
And the same goes for Massachusetts Sapphires. Teachers must use state-designated identical centers. The system actually doesn't allow for the kind of catastrophic navigational mistakes you're implying because the doors to the wrong channels are locked. They will turn you away at the counter.
yeah, but getting turned away at the counter is a catastrophic delay when you had to wait 3 weeks for that appointment.
Well, it's a delay, but
The very fact that applicants skip straight to shopping for providers before knowing what acronym they actually need proves my point. If the doors are locked, people are still spending weeks rattling the handles of the wrong doors, wasting precious time.
I see what you mean.
And time is exactly what procedural routing is meant to save. Let's talk about the mechanics of FBI channeling for a second, because I think this perfectly illustrates why procedural expertise trumps everything.
Go ahead.
Okay. The FBI charges a basic fee of $18 for a personal record check. If you do it the old-fashioned way, you print your fingerprints on physical, heavy-stock paper cards, specifically known as FD-258 cards.
Right?
You put them in a manila envelope, and you mail them to the FBI's CJIS division in West Virginia. Then you wait for the mail system, you wait for a clerk to open it, you wait for them to scan it. It is agonizingly slow.
Which is obviously a huge problem if you have a deadline.
A massive problem, especially for someone trying to get an apostille. For our listeners who haven't navigated international bureaucracy, an apostille is essentially a global notary stamp born out of the Hague Convention.
Right.
It is a way for a foreign government, say Spain or South Korea, to legally trust that your FBI background check is authentic. But an apostille requires multiple layers of government authentication, and these foreign visas have strict expiration windows.
They do.
Utilizing an expert for electronic FBI channeling, like the end-to-end service fingerprintboston.com provides, bypasses the mail entirely. The biometric data is encrypted and pinged directly to the federal database.
And it returns in hours.
Exactly. Hours instead of weeks. The real hurdle is the routing pipeline. If you rely on the mail, you fail.
The speed of that electronic pipeline is undeniably impressive. I'm not going to argue that, but an electronic pipeline is entirely worthless if the input you feed it is defective.
Well, sure, but
You're praising the speed of a digital highway, but if you put a broken car on that highway, it's just going to crash at a faster speed. The true expertise here isn't just having the login credentials for a digital submission portal.
then what is it?
The expertise is the human technician inspecting every single biological impression against FBI classification standards before they ever hit the send button.
You mean the quality control check?
Yes, the microbiology of it. We are talking about a technician identifying a smudged print, improper pressure, or incorrect rolling technique in real time. If you don't have that biological quality check, you get bounced by the FBI's algorithm anyway, and your fast electronic pipeline just delivered a rejection in record time.
I mean, I'm not discounting that physical quality matters. Obviously it does, but the routing dictates the type of quality required.
I come at it from a different way. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the routing is the complex part of that equation. Let's talk about how these captures actually work.
Okay.
You mentioned electronic channeling, which typically uses a live scan machine, right? It's an optical glass platen that digitizes the print. Do you know how that technology actually reads a finger?
I mean, it takes a high-resolution photograph of the ridges, essentially.
It's a bit more complex than that. It relies on something called total internal reflection.
Okay.
Light is shown into the glass prism. Where the raised ridges of your skin make contact with the glass, the light is absorbed. Where the valleys of your skin do not touch, the light reflects back. That is what creates the high-contrast digital image.
Oh, interesting.
But here is the biological catch. If an applicant has incredibly worn fingers from years of trades work, their ridges and valleys are basically flush. The light doesn't refract properly. It just creates a digital smudge.
Which causes a rejection.
Exactly. And this is where the physical expertise comes in. A skilled technician understands the physics of the medium. They know that a worn finger that completely feels on a high-tech $65 live scan glass might actually capture perfectly on a traditional century-old ink FD258 card for $50.
Really? The ink is better in that case?
Yes, because the physical ink can settle into whatever microscopic topography is left, creating a 3D impression that optical glass just can't read. An advanced piece of technology is frequently inferior to ancient ink entirely because of the physical realities of the applicant's skin. The physics matter far more than the pipeline it travels down.
Okay, that is a fascinating mechanical breakdown. But let's pull a lens back for a second and ask why we are even reliant on this specific physical capture in the first place. Like, why does the system demand such pristine, finicky ridge detail? We have advanced facial geometry now, we have iris scanning. Why are we dealing with ink and glass?
Because of the historical index.
Precisely. Fingerprints hold the absolute center of background checks because we have a century-old, massive legacy index of them. Name-based checks misfire constantly. If your name is John Smith, or if you changed your name after marriage, a text-based search is essentially useless for legal certainty.
Right.
Because the entire global governmental structure is anchored to this massive legacy fingerprint format, applicants are forced to rely on experts to interface with archaic requirements. If the bureaucracy had just modernized to accept a digital facial scan that I could securely take on my smartphone, this whole physical hurdle you're talking about would vanish overnight.
You think so?
Yes. The biological challenge only exists because of the bureaucracy's refusal to shift its index.
That is a fair critique of legacy tech, I'll give you that. But you are completely overlooking the accountability advantage of fingerprints. It's not just archaic stubbornness. It is about explainability and justice.
Explainability? AI facial recognition can be incredibly accurate.
Accurate, yes. But it functions as a black box. If an AI facial scanner says you are a 98% match for a known fugitive, it just outputs a percentage score. It can't tell you how it arrived at that conclusion.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But fingerprints, a trained human examiner can look at two fingerprint impressions and point to a specific bifurcation, where a ridge splits into two, or a specific ridge ending, and explain exactly point by point why they match or do not match to a jury.
Okay, that transparency is important. I'll grant you that.
It is incredibly crucial when someone's employment, their medical license, or their immigration status is on the line. You can appeal a human review, you can't appeal a black box AI algorithm. And this underscores exactly why physical capture quality is the ultimate arbiter of success.
Right.
That cannot be compared confidently by a human being. The FBI returns it because they refuse to guess with your life.
Okay, that makes sense fundamentally. But you're still treating the physical capture as this isolated, purely biological event. Let's look at how an applicant actually gets into the chair in the first place. The preparation for the appointment is a procedural trap in itself.
How do you mean?
To get a successful background check, you have to ensure your demographic data perfectly aligns with the agency's request.
Meaning your identification documents.
Yes, if a woman has her maiden name on her Massachusetts driver's license, but her agency paperwork was filed under her married name, she is going to get turned away at the counter. Or consider ORI numbers.
Ah, the originating agency identifier.
Yes, an ORI is essentially a highly specific alphanumeric zip code that tells the FBI exactly which state agency inbox to send the results to. If you are off by one digit, your pristine biological prints get sent into the void, and you have to pay and start over.
That is frustrating.
It is. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the biology of your fingerprints. It is a pure procedural hurdle that takes 5 minutes for an expert to sort out beforehand, but will cost you weeks if you get it wrong on your own. It's a paperwork trap.
I hear you on the ORI numbers. That can be a mess. But what is the other side of preparation? What actually dictates whether the scanner works? It's the biological preparation. Do you know why that hand sanitizer in your opening example ruined the adoption?
Well, you mentioned it dehydrates the skin.
Right. The alcohol rapidly evaporates moisture, dehydrating the epidermis, causing those microscopic ridges to temporarily collapse. The same goes for people who try to physically alter their hands.
Alter their hands? What do you mean?
People who are nervous about their prints being rejected will actually try to aggressively scrub or even lightly sand their fingertips with pumice stones before an appointment, thinking they are cleaning them.
Wait, really? That sounds incredibly counterproductive.
It destroys the ridges entirely. To capture successfully, you actually need the opposite. You need to apply hand moisturizer for 2 days prior to the appointment to plump the skin cells.
You can have your maiden and married names aligned perfectly.
Right. You can have your ORI numbers flawless. You can have your fee ready for your expedited FBI channeling. But if you used heavy hand sanitizer in the car or you sanded your fingers, you fail the capture. This purely physical reality proves that biology is the ultimate choke point.
But notice the catch-22 there. The applicant wouldn't even know to manage their biological preparation without the procedural guidance from an expert.
Fair point.
And what happens when the biology simply cannot be fixed? You mentioned chemotherapy earlier. Chemo severely degrades ridge detail. You can't moisturize your way out of that. In those cases, the applicant relies entirely on a bureaucratic safety valve, the quality waiver.
The waiver process for repeated unclassifiable prints, yes?
Exactly. Most federal and state programs have a documented process where, if you fail twice, they can bypass the fingerprint requirement and run a specialized name-based check. But you have to know that waiver exists to trigger it.
Right.
Applicants who are ignorant of the bureaucracy treat a second rejection as the end of the road. They give up on the job or the visa. Again, it is the knowledge of the system, the procedural expertise of a provider that saves the applicant, not just the physical capture itself.
That is a very fair point about the waiver. But I would counter that the very trigger for that bureaucratic safety valve is a biological failure. You only need the waiver because the physical world is messy. The bureaucracy had to invent a workaround for the limitations of the human body.
Well, let's step back and look at where this leaves someone trying to navigate all of this today. My position remains that the biometrics landscape, whether you are in Boston, Quincy, or anywhere else, is primarily a complex, fragmented web of overlapping terms and agencies.
Okay.
The central challenge is navigating this maze. Whether it's knowing that USCIS and the FBI run on entirely different tracks, understanding how ORI numbers route your data, or realizing that an international apostille requires an electronic channel to beat the clock, The complexity is immense. That is where an expert service provides essential navigational routing. The pipeline really does dictate everything.
And I still maintain that the bureaucracy, while intimidating at first glance, is fundamentally categorical. If you ask the right questions, the path clears. Once it does, the true definitive challenge reveals itself, which is the physical capture of biological ridge detail.
Right.
The avoidance of costly multi-week delays hinges entirely on an expert technician's physical review. It's knowing the physics of total internal reflection. It's knowing when to ditch the expensive digital glass for $50 ink, recognizing a marginal print before it's submitted, and overcoming the physical realities of age, labor, and medicine. At the end of the day, the biology dictates everything.
But I think where we absolutely find convergence today is in the practical reality for the listener. Whether the primary hurdle you face is navigational routing, or if it's the physical demands of live scan optics versus ink, one thing is certain. Attempting to navigate the Metro Boston biometrics landscape without an expert who deeply understands both sides of this coin is a recipe for severe delays.
Absolutely. You need an entity that respects the pipeline and respects the physics. You need the expertise to execute a flawless capture so you aren't dealing with an unclassifiable rejection 3 weeks later. And it is clear that fingerprintboston.com, operating out of Tewksbury and serving the greater Boston area, is uniquely positioned to solve both the macro bureaucracy and the microbiology for applicants.
So to our listeners, I highly encourage you to pull out your own agency request letters. Look closely at them. See where the true complexity of your specific background check lies. Is it in the routing codes and the apostille requirements? Or are you worried about the physical state of your fingertips?
It's worth evaluating before you walk into an appointment, because to succeed, you really do have to get both right.
Exactly. Think back to that international adoption. You can have the most brilliant, perfectly translated map of the bureaucratic maze in your hands. You can know exactly which terminal you need to be in. But that map won't help you board the plane if you physically erase your passport on the way to the gate.
Keep the hand sanitizer in your pocket.
Until next time, keep questioning the system.